The AIDS crisis in America was really, really frightening in the 1980s and 90s. It was an epidemic of misinformation, of discrimination, of fear. No one knew the cause of AIDS. No one knew how to prevent its spread. There were people dying in 6 to 12 months of horribly disfiguring, painful illnesses and deaths.
Historians will just ask, how did this happen? How did people get governed by irrational fears? Whether it is of the non-vaccinated who are the pariahs of America, as I have not seen in my lifetime any pariah group like this. During the AIDS crisis, can you imagine if gay men and intravenous drug users, who were the vast majority of people with AIDS, had they been pariahs the way the non-vaccinated are? But it would have been inconceivable, and should have been inconceivable. They should not have been made pariahs. But this is kosher. This is okay. You can make the non-vaccinated.
When I hear Prager rewrite history, I just want to say, hey, Prager, listen, first of all, AIDS people were and still are demonized. They were called sinners and people who deserved what happened to them. Secondly, in so many cases in the 80s, they had no idea about AIDS when they were infected because it took a long time for symptoms to evolve.
People were fired from their jobs. They were evicted from their apartments. Families disowned people. Hospitals would not treat people. Medical doctors turned away patients. Funeral homes would not bury people with AIDS because everyone was so afraid of this deadly disease. The response of government and society in general was no response. There was absolutely no sense of urgency, and nobody cared to try to develop a cure or treatments or even care for people with HIV, because as Ronald Reagan said in a cabinet meeting when asked, shouldn't we be doing something about this AIDS situation? No, why? Aren't the right people dying? I mean, the disease was primarily claiming the lives of gay men, so queers, drug users, junkies, and whores. And no one liked junkies, queers, and whores and thought they were expendable, so no one did anything to respond. My own lover died of AIDS in 1986, but there were countless times when he approached people where they spit in his face, where they, basically said, "Oh, get away from me, you pariah." There were incidents where we would get on a subway car, and because Scott was frail, we would sit down, and everybody around us in the car would get up and flee to the opposite ends of the car. And as soon as the car pulled into a train station, they would run out the door and move into the next car. We went to a diner for breakfast. Scott was skeletal. He weighed like 125 pounds, covered with KS lesions. Most of his hair had fallen out. He looked really bad. And the waitress came over. Instead of carrying menus, she was carrying a garbage can. She took the glass that he had drunk from and picked it up with a napkin and threw it in the garbage can, swiped all of the silverware from the table into the garbage can and yelled, "Get out, get out. We're not going to serve a diseased in this restaurant." And that's just one of countless encounters he, as an individual living with AIDS, faced.
Prager comparing people who refused to take a COVID vaccine with people in the 80s who were dying of AIDS is a complete false equivalency. There was no vaccine for HIV. Newsflash, there still isn't almost 40 years later. There are treatments, there is PrEP, but no vaccine. The people I knew who died of AIDS would have jumped on a vaccine. They would not have questioned it. They died horrifying deaths in the 80s of AIDS with purple lesions all over their body, pneumocystitis, all kinds of infections, loss of weight, night sweats, dementia. And on top of that, they were treated like pariahs. So to address Prager's other statement, which is imagine if people with AIDS in the 80s were treated like pariahs and demonized, they were.